Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. We also have a store at Chopped Tees, so if you would like to support us or just own a really good quality piece of merch, please take a look at chopped-tees.com, and Social Suplex is there. And we are also happy to announce, slightly delayed, the Social Suplex newsletter, which is being published every other week and is the brainchild of my friend Trish over here, who has put a lot of time and energy into it, along with some other folks like Tim Hunter. Last week's edition features a lead discussion by Lyric on women's wrestling in North America, which is super interesting, and the newsletter covers tons and tons of detail on all promotions across the world, which the breadth of information in this is stunning to me. And so a lot of really awesome people are putting a lot of time and energy into this. If you're interested, please feel free to take a look. You can sign up to have the newsletter delivered to your inbox. Unfortunately, we are not delivering it by hand or by mail, but an email is how we are doing this. So
I'm not sticking stamps to
no stamps. No stamps.
No stamps.
I could make us.
Come on, have you seen the price of stamps? I
it's
ain't
ridiculous.
Doing that,
make a saliva joke right here, but I'm not even going to go there.
God, it's too early.
It's too early. Friends, it is Sunday, April 13th, 2025, and we are going to kick things off with the state of AEW post Dynasty, the AEW pay-per-view that aired last Sunday night. What was that? April 6th from the Leocoris Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It features such incredible matchups as the Hurt Syndicate versus the Learning Tree.
Hey. Can we at least start with the freeway?
Adam Cole versus Daniel Garcia. And eventually Jon Moxley versus Swerve Strickland, where in a sad end to the brief 2-week build, Swerve Strickland was in fact defeated by Jon Moxley after what seemed like 125 run-ins from a bunch of various random people.
Sarah, by some means, were you not happy with the end of this show?
Samoa Joe is here, everybody! Yeah. So this week in the internet wrestling community was a little bit interesting because there was a lot of folks who really wanted to see Swerve defeat Mox and went into Sunday night looking for Swerve to defeat Mox. Swerve did not defeat Mox. Mox won the same boring match with the same boring run-ins that he's been doing for the last 6-ish months. Fine. But the next day or the day after that, there seemed to be a very interesting sort of switch in the way people were talking about Dynasty, where suddenly everybody became immediately convinced that the Moxley title reign was actually doing decent business for AEW, and so therefore it's okay that it's continuing because people actually seem to like it. And there was a lot of weird arguments. I even saw some people saying that this is a traditional North American type of wrestling heel that Mox was trying to portray, and that him not having good matches was actually something that was intentional. I don't know. The place went nuts. Trish and I are going to tackle this in 2 phases. We're going to talk about the pay-per-view and our feelings about it, the booking, etc. overall, and then we're going to delve into the business side of things. Because when people started talking about how actually AEW is doing good business, I was like, they're not. And so I locked Trish in a basement and said, crunch some numbers, girl. And she did, because she loves numbers and she loves basements. And so there's like a whole bunch of stuff.
I don't even have a basement.
I'm on a riff, girl. I'm on a riff. There's a whole bunch of stuff we're going to discuss shortly, and some things we're going to get into that I think, if you have been one of the people, and some of them people I like, respect, value their opinion, Trish and I both feel that way about some folks who have been jumped on the actually it's doing good business train, I'd like you to maybe slow down and possibly get off at the next stop, and maybe listen to what we have to say before we sort of launch down that further. So, AEW Dynasty, Trish. What were your overall thoughts on this card? What were your overall thoughts on this pay-per-view? Was there anything here that made you feel good before the inevitable letdown of Mox beating Swerve?
That's quite the setup, isn't it? Beforehand, last time we said this pay-per-view could have been an email.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I felt at the end. So I thought there were some really good matches on it. I thought that the story that was told with Toni Storm and Megan Bayne through the kind of the cycle, and then culminating in that match was really well put together. You know, that continues to, I think, to be the strongest thing on the entire show right now.
Yep.
Is what's going on with Toni Storm. So I thought that was well executed. I think that was a personal kind of highlight of the show. And then in terms of pure wrestling, you know, the three-way with Kenny and Speedball and Ricochet was very, very good. Maybe a few minutes, so it kind of missed its peak, which is unusual for Kenny. It's not Kenny's, normally he kind of hits that. But other than that, you know, for pure action and energy and feel, that was, you know, it was like a party pay-per-view match. You know, we had party TV matches. It was like a party pay-per-view match. So I really enjoyed that. I still enjoy, you know, the development of Carl Fletcher, Mark Briscoe, and it's kind of a weird one because, you know, Mark's great. He never is going to get the spot that, you know, some of his reactions and everything else and his work feels like it earns.
Yeah.
He's always going to be that guy, you know, that TV babyface that's going to lose to the pushed heel. But I think they put in a very good effort. Other than that, I found it difficult, and I think there was some big issues with the pacing and the structure of this that played a huge part in that. So yeah, it was too long. I know everyone moans about, you say, oh, it's too long, I spent $50 on it. Yeah, but actually, you know, when you get towards the end, and then when you're going to deliver the ending that you did, it feels like, how much of my time have I not spent wisely?
Yeah.
And I know that Collision Course over on A Torch mentioned this, but I really resonated with it, and it was where the kind of show was structured as well. So the matches kind of dragged out in terms of feeling too long.
Yep.
Where they didn't need to be, where they could have had shaved time. And then there was such like a lull in the middle that kind of felt like it didn't need to be there. So by the time you got to the main event, you know, you need something to kind of pick you up, or something that works in that aspect. And then when you don't have that, it just feels like one very, very long show that it doesn't feel like it gives you any energy kind of coming out of it. Yeah. So I think, yeah, the formatting, the pacing, the structure, I think it's one of their poorest examples of getting that wrong, to be honest. And that's one of the factors that led to kind of the main event feeling like it did, I think. But yeah, it was very much a B pay-per-view compared to Revolution. And, you know, we have to kind of get used to them as they change their structure. It's no longer the 4 big shows in the year that all feel like they've been built. You could feel in a lot of the matches kind of that they hadn't been built enough to be a pay-per-view match. Or they were put in completely the wrong place to get no kind of crowd reaction. You know, Adam Cole and Daniel Garcia. Yeah. Perfect example. So, you know, that was that probably should have been a TV match somewhere in a Collision. And I understand wanting to put it on pay-per-view, you know, you want to give Adam Cole his moment, and I think I have issues with that, but that's more around the Garcia reign, and, you know, his role, and Adam Cole's role in trios, but that's something else entirely. But yeah, it felt long, and it's one of the few ones where I struggle to find that much in it to take away.
What did you think of FTR's heel turn?
There's some funny stuff to this. So I thought the match was okay. I didn't think it was anything to write home about.
It was fine. It was not fine. Like this incredible match. It was fine.
No, I thought it was funny though that Dax took the pin and then turned. You know, normally you do Cope taking the pin, you know, and then you turn on the guy that loses the match. But, well, we all know where we are there. Yeah. And then into the stretcher job. And I thought, you know, the turn bit at the end was fine. I thought that, it was a good kind of heel turn. I did find it shouldn't be funny, but the problem is when you do like this stuff at the end and then you have like the Bucks come back and that loses more of its impetus. You know, people don't remember. And this is probably where we get to the biggest problem is like people don't remember like the well-told story between Toni Storm and Megan Bayne on this show. They don't remember so much the FTR heel turn. You know, they don't remember how great Kenny is now he's back in the ring, and then, you know, how much Speedball coming in and guys like Kevin Knight coming in have kind of been able to energize themselves and win over the crowd. They don't remember any of that because they just remember the end. So it's kind of ironic that like FTR turn heel and then their heel turn is gazumped, and we've seen this before on other shows, right? Yeah. So it got immediately gazumped by the Bucks return. So I'm not sure that's a great way of doing that. But yeah, it's one of them. It's one of them that makes me think that, you know, you commit to buying every pay-per-view, and maybe that isn't a model. Maybe you have to pick and choose a bit more. Maybe that's an adaptation.
It's definitely something that I sort of felt for myself afterwards, where, I mean, this was not one I was able to watch live just because of, you know, actual shoot jobs, but like but, you know, so some of these things I knew about, like I knew about the way that the match was going to end, you know, before I watched it, but I still was kind of surprised, at least for Swerve and Moxley, how boring the match was. It really reminded me of Cope versus Moxley, where everything that the crowd was into before the match started, they sort of went out of their way to set up the match so that the crowd would sort of immediately die, right? Like, let's go like right away to mat grappling, which I'm like, you know, and none of that I felt like played to Swerve's strengths. None of it I felt was there to make Swerve look good in any way. Like, I don't feel like he came out of that match like looking great.
This is the problem with the structure, and this is the problem with the Moxley match structure, full stop, right? So if Moxley was more of his tweener character, and he was just demolishing people, you know, vicious, aggressive, you know, nasty, the way that he came into AEW, you know, when he was falling back into his John Moxley character of old, the way that he was a few years ago, you know, running up to like the Adam Page program with the Texas Deathmatch and that sort of thing. If it was that John Moxley and he was demolishing people in that way, and the babyface fought but ultimately couldn't overcome because he's this vicious killer, this would be a lot more palatable.
Yes.
And instead what we've got is, so you come into this match, right? And you're giving Swerve Strickland 2 weeks of actual focus. You can tell me, oh, it was built from the last pay-per-view, but the first 2 weeks were focused on Adam Copeland and John Moxley, right? They're not focused on Swerve Strickland and John Moxley. So then you get to the actual show after 2 week build. And the week before, what you do is you have the Death Riders, you know, go after and take out Willow. And so you then need a babyface be able to get revenge for that.
Yep.
To give him something, right? And then you get into the match, and then he puts him through glass at the end of Dynamite. So automatically, you know, this should be a fast start. And you need a fast start, actually, because, you know, this has been a long show, it's where the pacing and everything else catches up with you. You need that fast start. And instead of a fast start, we get 10 minutes of grappling, which doesn't look good. This is the thing that I think I hate the most about John Moxley's offense now. And, you know, I've been watching Moxley for, you know, a decade and a half now, following him around the globe. I'm waiting for someone to call me a Moxley hater, and I'm quite going to enjoy that, to be honest with you. The amount of time I follow this guy around. But it's like, in a nice, non-creepy way. It sounded really funny. I was like, I followed him around like I'm chasing him around. Oh, God's sake. No, but
stalking
you know,
him at airports.
Yeah. Oh God, stalking at airports is the worst. I see that
with a
so much.
Box of toys. Sorry,
maybe like a Kip Sabian hat, you know, like a box. Yeah. No, but the thing that annoys me about this part of like what he's becoming this type of a heel is that this grappling does not look good.
No,
it doesn't look solid. And then when you do this grappling, so if you were doing this grappling and it was just leading to a huge babyface comeback and you were trying to build and hold that down, so then you build up momentum for it and like the crowd for it, then fine. But that's not what we're doing.
No.
We don't get that babyface comeback. What we're building up for is a bunch of runnings, right? So you remove any kind of agency from that babyface or anything that you gain back from that comeback by having that grappling bit at the start, by then going straight into, well, it doesn't matter what happens with the babyface here because we need to wait for the runnings. So the crowd are waiting for the runnings.
Yes.
They're not waiting for the babyface comeback, and therefore this 10 minutes of shitty grappling doesn't do anything for anybody.
Nope.
All it does is it ruins the pace of the match and it brings it down. And it's one of those things, it's like, and I know the comparison is to Roman Reigns, so Roman would do these sort of things, right? And you had the similar thing. And it's like, okay. This is AEW, right? At what point are we accepting shit main events on a continuous basis or bad pay-per-view endings like we've had now 4 in a row?
Yep.
Because it's something somebody else did somewhere else, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Does it, like, you know, he wants to watch his Roman Reigns tapes? You know what, go and watch WrestleMania 39 with a Cody match, because that was a much better structure. Not 40, 39. and then you put someone down and it was a much better structure, much better match. So even Roman can do better than this. But then if you want to watch someone in AEW, you want to watch a heel do it and actually make the babyface work and then defeat them, and then if you want to use the interference, you can, go and watch Kenny Omega in 2021.
Yep.
You do not need to have bad matches to be a heel in this storyline in this way. You know, why are we accepting main events of 3 3/4 maximum? For what? That kill the crowd. And it's like,
they kill the crowd every fucking time. The crowd absolutely dies. I don't understand it.
It's so funny because it's like, all the talk is like, oh, you know, well, this might, it had a little bit of heat here or hit there. Why are we talking about a main event not having heat or having heat as a talking point? Like, this shouldn't be happening. This is like happening because you are not getting this right.
They have people have Stockholm syndrome at this point where they're like, well, this is just how it has to be. Why does it have to be like this? Why do we have to sit back and accept this and say, well, this is how it has to be? Like, why? What are we doing that? Like, I want to reiterate what I said after Full Gear 2023, right? Who backstage thinks this is good, and why is anybody listening to them, right? Because the one thing you could say about AEW consistently is the wrestling is out of this world. Like, they have fantastic wrestling, and they had fantastic wrestling on this fucking pay-per-view. And yet, instead of us dealing with, like, you know, okay, well, Mox is at least putting on solid main events, we're doing this, like, fucking fake MMA bullshit, right? Like, if I want to watch MMA or some, like, amateur jujitsu shit, I'll go to watch MMA. I'm not doing that. I'm watching professional wrestling. And the fact that you're taking somebody like Swerve, who is capable of connecting with an audience, and not giving him anything in this after, like, this is the part where I'm just like, and maybe I'm being unfair about this. I never understood and have not understood at all why you would take someone who is as over as Swerve, who the audience absolutely adores, and feed him to someone like Mox, who's having an absolutely shit title reign with a 2-week build, right? After you did 3 months of garbage with Copeland, okay? And then you're going to feed Swerve to this in a shitty match that nobody got over or got better at or nothing happened, right? And then, like, well, let's throw the Young Bucks in at the end and that'll make it all better. Like, I just don't get what's going on here and what the thought process is. Like we're just waiting for this interminably to end. Like, this is just an interminable thing that we have to get through. Like, why?
The best thing about it is like, it almost feels disrespectful to put Swerve in that position. So you give 3 months to Adam Copeland, and you give 2 weeks to this guy, and you know and then you do this thing where, and I knew, do you know what? I knew it as soon as like you saw the numbers, and I knew what the numbers were going to be. They're pretty much exactly where you would put them in line, right? And I knew it. Like, the conversation would be, and I heard Dave say this the other day on War, or in One, sorry. You know, maybe the main event wasn't as strong as with Revolution. And I wanted to throw my fucking head against the wall. And we'll talk about the value of title matches in main events. But it's like, you give 3 months to the ex-WWE guy, and you put him in that spot, and all you're doing is reinforcing all these things. And that's the thing with this story as a whole. So this story stand out, we're going to raise the originals, we're going to raise these people that have been overlooked, you know, without mentioning that been overlooked by the booker of the company. And then what do? So we gave Private Party a reign, which had nothing actually to do with this. It was a decision made after the Bucks match in Wrestle Dream. Okay, we gave them a reign, we gave them nothing, and we had them killed by incoming WWE guys and the Hurt Syndicate doing the same gimmick. Okay.
And they haven't been on TV or a pay-per-view fucking since then.
No, that's it.
Seen nothing about them.
No. Oh, and then, you know what we're going to do is Daniel Garcia's going to get a reign. You know, he's just re-signed. We're going to do nothing. And then he doesn't... Did he wrestle on pay-per-view once? I don't think he did until he lost. No,
not until he lost.
That's probably why I ended up on pay-per-view on this one, for a match that probably didn't really want to be there. And, you know, the belt goes back onto Adam Cole, who was doing pretty good stuff in the trios division, but no, we need to put him out into a singles thing, even though... Yeah, it's just... Even
though he had the 2 back-to-back years, won shittiest singles feud in the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Awards, has not had a singles feud that anyone has given a fuck about in years.
I'm less bothered about that, and I'm more bothered about the fact that Garcia is another example of someone that's given a belt to keep people quiet, but isn't getting the effort put in. Because there's a vast difference depending on what, you know, it's, you know, you get a belt and people go, oh, you're being pushed. It's like, well, Takeshi's not getting treated the same with that belt as Will Ospreay did, or Garcia's not getting treated the same way as Adam Copeland did. And you don't give people the same opportunities, which I thought was what this story was all about, quite frankly, at the start. And then, you know, we make a mess of the original guys with Cassidy and with Paige at World's End, which is just... a joke. And then now we're going to do this with Strickland. And this is what I said. So I said a few weeks ago, like, I can't believe they're, one, stupid enough to tease something, and we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
But also that they're going to put this guy in this position where you are going to make him look secondary to this ex-WWE guy who's aging and doesn't have anywhere close as much to offer to your company going forward. No. And that's exactly what they've done. So we're reinforcing this whole belief that these people coming in are worth more than your talent that you bring up. And, you know, this this is not a new thing. This is something that's been going on, you know, for years. And, you know, when you think about Double or Nothing 2022 is really like the focal point of where that started or culminated. And that's where a lot of people still have PTSD from. Yep. You know, we still talk about that pay-per-view quite consistently as an example of where it kind of broke down and, you know, where they kind of went wrong in terms of putting it together. And there seems to be this kind of constant on this now. So when I think about that one, you know, you had the Hardy Boys going over the Bucks.
Yep.
And that was going to be because they were going to go on to win the titles before what happened with Jeff. You had an Owen final of former NXT talent Samoa Joe and Adam Cole. You know, you put Darby out in the first round against Jeff Hardy.
Yep.
You know, you had a women's final of Britt and Ruby Soho after the crowd had turned on Ruby Soho in the semi-final when she faced Chris Statlander in the same building, you know, a few days earlier. And then you had Darby Allin putting over Kyle O'Reilly in a very last-minute match, just shoved onto the card. And then the main, you know, after a run like Tony pretty much couldn't care about, by February, you had Punk go over Paige. Yep. So you're doing this thing, and it's not just then, you know, you can think of other things kind of since then. You can think about the Paige-Britt feud and how that kind of, not Paige, Saraya. Sorry, Paige, old name. You know, you can think about what happened last summer with Danielson and Hangman and how people reacted to that. You know, Private Party to Hurt Syndicate is just the latest example. But it's like, and this is happening over and over and over. And all you do is you reinforce the people that you are making are not worth as much. And that was the key thing with this Strickland thing, you know. We thought we can't be stupid enough to, one, make him look secondary to someone like Adam Copeland, and two, you know, you teased a match, and you did tease a match, just like you did last summer when you teased it with Hangman and Swerve for All In, and then you bulked on it, and everyone kind of, and, you know, and look what business that did, but there we are. It's like, you teased a match that people want, and what you ended up doing was telling them that it wasn't worth as much as they believed it was. Like, we don't see this on the level you do. You didn't need to do this. I keep saying this. You didn't need to do this. You could have found somebody else. You did this, and all you've done is boot people who you know, who most of it who care about your company most, who do more promotion for your company than you do, quite frankly. Yeah. And, you know, you boot them, and you boot them, and you boot them. And then what? You know, you get to the end of this match, so you've given Strickland nothing in the way you've composed this match in terms of, and in the program. You know, you gave up 2 weeks of it so you could focus on Copeland. And it's like, then, okay, so what's the moving on part? So, you know, the most dangerous man in AEW is taken down by one BT trigger. Really? Yeah. That's enough. Okay. Well, that doesn't make him look like an idiot. Oh, and then, you know, he's doing this thing, you know, we're doing something with Adam Page now, to an extent, and you have him run in, and this should be, you know, it feels like a pivotal moment in his story, and instead, you know, you do the first bit, he gives him the dead eye, and then he's just thrown out, and he's on the side, does nothing in the end, looks like a fucking geek. Yep. And it's just one part of many things. So Swerve looked like a geek, Hangman looked like a geek, Orange Cassidy's looked like a geek, Jay White, that's a joke, he looks like a complete geek, you know. Darby Allin's now being put in a position when he does come back, you don't even know what response he's going to get because of the way this has gone. Yep. You know, and it's like, what are they gaining out of this? And it's
what are they getting? No, that's the part that I'm sort of endlessly boggled by. What are you getting out of this, right? We've seen over and over again that you have an opportunity to make people into bigger stars and to give them, like, you know, headliners, which will help you sell tickets, which will get you more ratings. And over and over and over and over again, we say, no, we're not going to do that. Hey, look, there's this ex-WWE guy who's been on TV for 30 years or whatever the fuck it is. He's actually better, right? Like, this is actually going to be better for you. Like, and it's not more interesting. It's not more emotionally compelling. The wrestling isn't better, right? Like, the wrestling is never better. Do you think anything Cope has done is better than anything Swerve has done? It sure as shit isn't. Like, if you want to make the argument that Mox is doing these shitty grappling matches for heat, then that's fine. I think it's still stupid, right? But it's at least an argument. Cope isn't having boring matches for heat. He's just not that good at wrestling anymore. Like, and this is what you're promoting. Like, this is the part I just don't understand. Like, there are wrestling. I talked about this last fucking episode. But, Triple H would kill for half these guys. Right? Yeah. And he's got his own fucking problems, and you can't get out of your way and get something like again, what is the promotion for? Is the promotion for the audience, or is the promotion for you and these old ex-WWE stars to redo parts of their career that they didn't like? Like, why do we have AEW? Like, was this my fault for thinking that, like, hey, it's going to be a little bit different? We're not going to end in a situation where it's, like, just guys the booker likes, regardless of whether their talent is there or not, regardless of whether they can actually do the matches or not, whether they can bring the ratings and the pay-per-view buys and the houses. No, it's just guys that you want to see on top. Okay, fine. Like, if that's the case, then that's fine. Like, maybe I was a fool for believing it, that it would be different this time. But, like, it just seems like such a fucking joke at this point. And it's like, how many times can you get smacked in the face? And then, like how many times can you get smacked in the face? Like, Swerve Strickland, you're gonna, again, I cannot get over the stupidity of beating this guy that way. What the fuck?
Yeah, but we're gonna do this again. We're gonna do this again in a month. But we're gonna do this again in a month when, they're gonna do the Owen, and half the people that are supporting this angle believe that Adam Page is gonna face him and win it All In, and we're gonna do this all over again. Like, we're literally going to do this all over again. Because they're not content with, like, booting you once. They're going to boot you again. And thank God, like, he's still in his tweener phase. Because if I had to see him do the Daniel Bryan-style endorsement of Roman Reigns, I think I'd be sick.
Come on, you know that's coming. You know that's coming.
Of course I do, but whatever.
They might even do it with Trish. They might even do it with Ospreay. Okay, you're going to have a whole bunch of people convince themselves that Ospreay is actually going to beat Mox, and maybe he will. Maybe he will. But there's as equal a chance that he won't. Okay,
yeah, there is.
And people are there is, and people are going to be like, oh well, it's okay that Ospreay lost. Like, this is good. They're doing it for heat. Like, how many fucking people are going to get turned off of this promotion while we sit around and wait for Darby Allin to possibly finish climbing Everest, if that even is the plan? And this is what comes to my question, right? Because one of the things that I thought was fascinating, I actually have a question for you.
Okay.
One of the things that Tunnel Talk talked about today was whether or not Swerve winning would be a satisfactory conclusion to the Death Rider story, right? Mm-hmm. And I think my question to you is what does a satisfying ending to the Death Rider story look like? And is it even possible now?
No. I don't think so. So I'll give you an example of this. So I was thinking about this the other day where I think, so they are comparing this to, like, they think it's their bloodline. And AEW's become obsessed with having a bloodline. I remember hearing...
Why?
But I remember hearing MJF quotes in, like, 2023 of, like, when with the Adam Cole, we found our bloodline.
Oh,
and it's like... And it's the same with this. They're obsessed with this bloodline story that they think is going to tie a rocket to somebody and is going to make something. And I feel like they're learning the wrong lessons out of this, right? Because when I think about the bloodline story, there's some key factors in it. The people that got hot actually, Sami Zayn was a pivot. They realised it was working and they pivoted into it.
Yes.
We're not pivoting here.
No.
There is no pivot. And there is nobody in this role or in group or anywhere that can play that Sami Zayn role. There's no one with the charisma to do it. It's not Claudio, for God's sake.
No.
It's not there. They're not using anyone like that. And then you don't have someone coming in like a Cody on that level. You had 2 draws in this story, in the Bloodline story, that came in. Before then, they were, the ratings suffering, attendance suffering. They fell onto something. This wasn't something they planned. It wasn't something they laid out. They had 2 situational things that happened that they fell into. It's not the same. If you're looking for what happened with the Bloodline and thinking all that structure and that layout works for you and killing all the rest of the baby faces works for you, well, where is your hot baby face coming from? And are you going to sabotage it? Because that's been a big thing. Are you going to pivot with something's hot, or are you going to keep to your plan and probably piss everyone else off? Secondly, not blaming Darby, because they've known about this for a long time.
Yes,
they've known he was doing it, and they've made that choice. It's not on Darby. I see it all the time, and it's like, it's not on him. It's on them. If they choose to do that, it may hurt him now. Yes. It absolutely may hurt him, right? The third one is Triple H, reign of terror, so to speak, ended with the Batista turn, and he won at WrestleMania. That was successful, and he was an automatic draw. the chances of someone being an automatic draw straight away in AEW after are very, very minimal. Because AEW has a different structure. And when we talk about quarter hours later, we'll discuss this. You are not going to get masses of time to build up your numbers straight away. The chance of someone being an automatic straight away, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't in this company. And it's the way it's set up and it's the way the audience does, because the audience is so mixed. It's not one kind of solid block. So you don't get the John Cena instant impact. You don't get the thumbs up, thumbs down Batista impact. It doesn't exist in this company. So if you think you're going to tie some rocket ship to someone and it's going to make somebody, it's probably not. The nearest you've got to that, and you think about it, right? The Bloodline style story, when it wasn't, their story was the rise of Adam Page. And then 3 months later, you killed it with your follow-up. The follow-up is more important even than the start. But it's like, you're learning the wrong lessons here. The fact, I saw the Nick Khan quote this week around, you should ignore social media. And I thought it was hilariously funny because your whole story and the thing that, your next bit of growth and all that sort of stuff relied on you pivoting because you listened to social media on Cody Rhodes. Right. So that's kind of a very funny one. But yeah, there's no Sammy, there's no Cody here. This is not a Bloodline story. This is not going to turn your business around just like that because you think you're going to put over someone at the end. But how much damage are you going to do along the way when you're basically an ensemble cast that appeals to lots of different places? And then, the other thing is with this is when it's kind of justification, the justification is, it's going to put someone over here or we're going to do this. And what you can't help but look at is, but who else could be in these positions that would do a better job and have a stronger story? And that's where the want for the Swerve Hangman match, other than the fact that we, and a lot of people feel that that's, the top available kind of singles match available for the promotion for a stadium show at the moment. And it should have been last year. That feeling holds. But the other part of it is that you're looking at it and going, Will Ospreay. So if you're going to coronate him at All In, and I don't think that's a certainty right now. And I know people say the Owen's not a certainty, but I think that kind of is. But you're going to coronate him in like a program that he's not even involved in right now.
Yeah.
He cut some promo with Darby Allin 5 months ago. Okay, well, the other guy that he's going up against in the Owen, has been involved in the story since, I was in Wrestle Dream, has the personal history with Jon Moxley, is an original with the promotion, all those sort of things. And the other guy, and you've got Will Ospreay doing, and, as good as, I like party matches, fine, and then doing promos about going to Disneyland. He's not connected, and you need to wrap him in very, very quickly, like now. Because if you don't, you're going to risk another backlash because people aren't going to understand where the story is leading them and that. But also, if I was going to coronate Will Ospreay, would I want him beating this Moxley character like this? No. Could I have put the belt on a hot Kenny Omega and you're on the character that he brought in from New Japan?
Oh, yeah.
And had all the personal and emotional history? Would that have been a better use of getting Will Ospreay over? You search me, It's like Kenny coming off his injury was one of the biggest promotional tools ever handed to them. Here's a guy that has always put up massive numbers for you, has incredible intrigue, worldwide support, and have you done enough with that? Are you doing enough with that? Could you have done something to then get, if you want to put the ball on Will Ospreay, and I believe that's what they want as the centerpiece of their company, you could have used him to do that in a much more effective way than this. Because that's the game here. It's not just about what is this program doing, it's could something else have done better? And you not only left your audience with a belief that it could, but everything else feels that way as well.
Well, I think that's the part with the Will Ospreay stuff that's going to be so frustrating to me if they do decide to go with him at All In, which, like you said, is still extremely up in the air right now. Mm-hmm. I think for me, it would be like, what a fucking waste, right? Like, what a waste of you brought this guy in. He's definitely a centerpiece. He's all over TV all the time. You've sort of taught the audience to love him, as you should. Like, I have as I've said repeatedly, despite many assertions by others to the contrary, I have no problem with Will Ospreay. And I think at some point he should be fucking world champion. Abs-fucking-lutely, right? It'd be fantastic. Give him a bunch of TV title defense. It'd be fantastic. Whatever. Not TV title. TV match defenses. It'd be great. But I feel like it's such a giant waste to just plop him in the middle of this story in the absolute end of the 9th inning, right? Bottom of the 9th inning. Let's dump him in there. He has no connection to anything. He has no connection to Moxley. Moxley's not talked about him. This has nothing to do with him being an AEW original, and he'll win and it'll be great and that'll be the end of it. Like, I'd be fucking disappointed if I was him. Like, and God knows Ospreay has enough trouble creating any kind of emotional stakes in most of his matches to begin with in most of his programs, right? You're going to put him in with Moxley, and I have a hard time believing that A, that would be a good program, or B, that would be a good match, right? Does anybody want to see Moxley grapple or do stupid BJJ shit with fucking Ospreay? I don't think they do. I don't. That's not why most people like Will Ospreay, okay? So whatever. I'm I don't want to get pre-mad about this, but it just seems like such a waste. Like you said, why wouldn't you put Ospreay up against somebody that he has at least some history with? Somebody like Kenny, like it just, I don't know. That's the part that makes no sense to me. But this is where the lack of ability to fucking plan is killing them. The lack of ability to come up with something and stick to it for any length of time is killing them. And the lack of ability to pivot when shit's clearly not working is killing them. And it's just sad to see like Tony Khan go out in these press conferences and be like, oh, the Young Bucks are going to add intrigue to this storyline. No, they're fucking not. They're not.
And it's not on them, because they tried very hard on Wednesday night to try and pitch something together, after everyone was kind of like, oh, it's all been planned out. It's like,
of course it hasn't
been planned out like that for a long time.
Of course it hasn't been planned out. Come on.
But they did a decent job of trying to put it together. What did you think about the Bucks coming back into the roles that they left in, so to speak?
I'm fine with them coming back as EVPs. I think it suits their personalities and like the sort of attitude thing they have going on. I like the idea of them being sort of little chaos agents, if they would be allowed to be chaos agents. I enjoy the male form and they look fabulous. So that was also a pleasant and enjoyable experience for me. Tits out always. Thank you, Tunnel Talk. But I just think that it doesn't make sense to dump them in this. And the fact that Swerve is more angry at the Young Bucks than he is at Mox, the fact that Swerve doesn't get a rematch after fucking Cope got a fucking rematch within like the next 2 weeks because of the interference just pissed me off even more. Like just, you know what I mean? Like just show me what you care about here. Like, oh, we got to do a TV title defense for Copeland because he got screwed because everybody said the pay-per-view match sucked. But like, that logic flies out the window here, but whatever. It's fine. I like the Young Bucks. I'm happy to see them on television. They definitely cut a better promo than Kenny did. God love him.
God.
I can't imagine anybody cutting a worse let me put it this way. I love mess. There are things that I like in wrestling that are entertaining and enjoyable, but not good, right? Mm-hmm. FTR's heel turn, entertaining and enjoyable, not necessarily good, but it's also professional wrestling. And a lot of times things aren't good, and that's okay. So, like, that was fine. But, like, Kenny's promo was like, someone told him 30 seconds before he was going out there that he had to go out there and give a promo. And he was like, all right. Like, it was shades of the Golden Jets promo.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
it really was. It was just a disaster.
I mean, we always give him a bit of a pass because, like, he has his quirks and sort of things. But then I watch what he does on the New Japan press conferences, and it's a different guy. Right. And the great question is, why does that not happen in America? Is it the material he's given? What is it? What is not working here in the same way? And I thought the most there was lots of things that were kind of just like, it lowered the kind of importance or seriousness of him being taken out like he was last year. And I don't know.
I love the guy, but he looks like he's phoning it in. Right? He just does. Yeah. He looks like he's phoning it in. You compare Kenny that we got on this week, or even the guy who came out and took flowers from the audience after he won the international title at Revolution. He just seems like, oh yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's nice that the fans are here. Like, I'd kill for half the intensity that he showed after Wrestle Kingdom or during Wrestle Kingdom, right? It's hard not to feel like his heart's just not in AEW for whatever reason. And honestly, I don't know that I can necessarily blame him, but I'm sort of sad about it. Like, it's kind of a bummer.
As I said, you had this huge promotional tool of his comeback. It should have been the biggest thing in the company.
Right. And instead it was fucking Copeland.
It should have been the biggest thing treated as the biggest thing in the company. Because numbers-wise, at the start of January, it was the biggest thing in the company. But it should have been treated as more. You don't bring someone else over the back of him. You don't, kind of put him in his own little silo and out the way in his sandpit, which is kind of what we're seeing continuously at the moment. We get people out the way so we don't have that expectation. And I thought one of the interesting lines was him bringing up restore the feeling, which is the words I'd like to burn out of the entire dictionary. Like, fuck off with this fucking restore the feeling stuff. But what it kind of resonated to me was something, that I know Sean Ross Sapp's mentioned this week, and it's the they're all aware of this and the reaction it's getting and the feeling. And, you know, if talent are telling Sean, you know, we feel like the heat's on the company and not the character, and that's how we feel. Absolutely. Like, the heat is not on Jon Moxley.
No!
Because if the heat was on Jon Moxley, then the matches wouldn't start out in fucking silence most of the time. The heat is on the company for this booking because people hate it. The same way, you know, it's the same with the Max thing. It was exactly the same with the Max reign.
Yes,
you know, the heat was on the company. It wasn't on MJF, the character, who was being cheered, you know? And I think it kind of showed that a little bit. I think it's interesting that everyone's so really certain that it's going to be Anarchy in the arena following up and then on to Swerve and Hangman and the Bucks are all in, because I'll make a bet. I don't think it is going to be Swerve and Hangman versus the Bucks all in, because I don't think it makes sense in a number of reasons. So, for example, I think you've got FTR and Copeland and Christian on that card.
Yeah.
And so you're already going to have that. They're planning currently a match for Double or Nothing that makes me think I don't see why you would do that if you were then running Swerve and Hangman versus the Bucks at All In.
Yeah.
Like, because you're kind of taking that thing out, all right? I mean, you can put them on the same side in eventual Blood and Guts. I think Swerve mentioned Blood and Guts. It's going to be on TV after Double or Nothing or whatever. But I don't... When I look at what they're doing there, I don't think they're doing a Swerve Hangman tag match with the Bucks all in. I don't see it. And that's never been mentioned, you know?
No. It's been hinted at, and Dave has been under the impression that it's occurring, but it has not really been mentioned.
It's not even been mentioned to a lot of people there, to be fair, you know? God, the guy that's been trying the hardest for Swerve services has been Max from multiple people for All In. So
that'd be great. Everybody would love that, right?
Yeah, well, that's who's been after him the most. So I don't think that's a guarantee, and especially once you see the tag match for Double or Nothing, you'll kind of figure that out. But yeah, the thing about the Death Riders is this, you know, you can sit there and you can say you enjoy it. Like
Fine.
The Bloodline. Okay, I have no issue with that. You know, and we can sit here and we can point out the damage that it does to the baby faces, the damage that it does to the perception of what your promotion storytelling is, and we can point out, you know, how the work is fucking boring, and why I have to feel like I have to watch shitty matches at the end of every pay-per-view is acceptable, is God knows what. What I don't have any time for is the argument that your enjoyment should be subjective to the business is up.
Yeah.
And that's a false statement anyway. But, you know, like this thing of saying the business is up, so we have to subject ourselves to enjoying something that we didn't enjoy is a false premise. You don't say that. So if you don't enjoy something, but it's successful, then so be it. That's John Cena. That's John Cena for the last 2 decades, right? Massively successful in his quarter hours and things like that. Do I have to enjoy what he did? No, and a lot of other people didn't, because AEW wouldn't exist otherwise.
Right.
Because something is successful does not mean that it's good. You know, Ant-Man 3, fucking awful film. Successful? Don't care. Still an awful film. Like...
Now I'm like, which one was Iron Man 3?
I like Iron Man was okay. I like the Iron Man film. But there's all this talk and people doing like this. But what happened here was there was just so many different things that happened all at the same time that led to kind of the reaction that you got. And so many of them were predictable. That's my most frustrating thing, is so many of them are predictable. But there were so many things. Have you ever seen the film Rush?
Oh God.
It's like the racing film. It's on James Hunt and Niki Lauda.
I have not
Kid on
seen
Niki
it.
Lauda. But there's a scene in that, right? And his wife is an actress, Susie Miller, and she goes and she says to him, you know, if it had just been the drinking or the dope or the infidelity or the moods, it might have even worked. But when it's all of them, and he says, you know, yes, I know, I'm terrible. She says, no, you're not terrible. You're just who you are at this point in your life. God help anyone who wants more. And that's how this made me feel. If it was just You know, the bad ending or the bad wrestling or the heatless finishes or the interference prone that ruins kind of any chance of a babyface comeback or the pushing and the presenting of WWE guys, you know, over your homemade talent or, you know, the taking pivotal moments like the Hangman thing and just throwing it to one side. If it was just one of those things, you know, if Revolution had been main evented by the women's match, would we have been so down on this one? You know, if it hadn't been 4 pay-per-views in a row of questionable endings, would we be so down? But it's all of these things. And because it's all of them, that's how it makes you feel.
It's just, it's exhausting. It's depressing. You're like, oh, it's never going to get any better. You're like, oh, they've learned the lesson. They saw that this was going differently. They've changed, and then they've never changed. They didn't learn the lesson. It's the same shit it's been for the last 3 years, you know, and it's just kind of a bummer. It makes you not want to watch anymore.
They had an opportunity. They had an opportunity. They had an opportunity with what's going on with them. They've had many of them.
They've had a bunch.
This was a missed one. This was a missed opportunity that has, you know... And the big thing I've seen this week has not been the people shouting really loud, oh, you should enjoy this, you want to pivot, fuck you, and all this stuff. And it's not been the people going, they really should have done this. It's been the people that have gone silent.
Yep.
How quiet some of our kind of places have been. How quiet some people have been. The despondency, and that's that acceptance. That is the most dangerous thing. It's not the people shouting the loudest or the, you know, on either side. It's the ones that just... feel solemn. You know, I had someone who went to the show on Sunday night describing it as they left as like it might as well have been a morgue, and you don't want that. Not in this day and age. Not in a time period now where we're in, you know, where everything real world kind of construct is interfering on how you enjoy everything. Like, you don't want to be left with that feeling.
Well, that's the part of it that I feel like sometimes gets underplayed. Like, first of all, the situation in the world right now sucks, right? Mm-hmm. To be an American sucks. And some of us brought it on ourselves, so I'm not trying to say you should feel bad for us, right? But at the same time, it fucking sucks. And I think the thing that people forget when they shit on the Bloodline or they shit on Brochachos, or God forbid they even shit on the Young Bucks at times, is that watching wrestlers have a good time doing wrestling is fun, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think part of the reason why the Brochachos was successful and popular was because you were watching Adam Cole and MJF have fun. Like, they had a good time. And then all of a sudden you lost that. Like, now, we don't have that anymore. There's no fun. There's never any fun. Nobody's having fun, right? And, you know, we had Kenny's return, and oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. Kenny's back, and it's been a bummer and kind of a letdown. You know, oh, we've got Swerve and Hangman. Look at the stuff they're doing. Oh my gosh. Well, no, it's kind of squandered and it's sort of a letdown, right? Like, hey, Daniel Garcia's awesome. We really like him. Oh, no, well, he's on Collision and, you know, it's kind of a letdown. Like, nobody seems to be having a good time. And I feel like that's why so many people like responded to that 8-man tag on Wednesday, right? Yeah. Was it just, it seemed like those guys were having fun, right? Like, it
had
just,
energy.
Yeah,
there's so much that just doesn't have energy right now.
Doesn't have energy right now. And I think that's the part that I wish that AEW would, like, you know, fuck off with your trying to get your own Bloodline bullshit. Why don't you tell one fucking good story? Like one, and have it make sense, or even have it be silly and ridiculous like fucking FTR were last night. Like, just do that. That's possible. That's doable. You have a bunch of people in that company who know how to do that. No, like, let's do some more heat segments. That's great. I feel bad because I also feel like this is one of those times where, look, Trish is not going to say I told you so because she's a nice person. I'm the fucking bitch. We fucking told you so, right? So if we're out of step this week and everybody's like, they were so down on the show, I don't know what the problem is. Everything's really cool and great. We told you so last year, okay? You were like, no, Danielson, it's going to be awesome. Danielson's going to be the title. We told you so. It didn't do shit. Moxley, this thing's going to go great. We're going to do fine. They're going to put Darby over. We told you. It didn't do shit, all right? We don't want to be like the fucking witches in Macbeth where we're predicting the future because we want to be wrong. I would really fucking like to be wrong for once. Trish would love to be wrong. Look at her face. She's dying here, okay? Like, I would love to have them go into fucking All In with, like, a plan, because there's not one, but maybe we could get one quickly, like a plan of what we're going to do and, like, an idea of who we're going to put over and just fucking stick to it, okay? And, like, focus on entertaining your audience and not on keeping your wrestlers happy.
And it will always be the dominant tool for conversation. When you have a story at the very top, the same we saw with Max, with the Devil. We had Swerve and Hangman underneath, but it was never feeling like it was that, because it's the top thing that drives the conversation still, and especially when they use the defenses that they're using. I want to play with some of these because these are fun. And,
Let's go.
Yeah. So here is 2 statements being made about the Death Riders, and I'll read them and then I'm going to reword them. And I want you to tell me, and because I basically want to just explain how easy it is to make these statements without using kind of massive numbers or things or, just anything really. So one was, AEW internally has touted the success of the Death Riders and the Moxley winning the title, citing a disconnect with online fans. AEW claims that the company's Live Plus DVR quarters have climbed throughout the year, with Moxley as champion, peaking with the Moxley Cope street fight. Okay, right. Let me change that up. So quarters, I think actually just means this quarter by my reckoning.
Quarter meaning not quarter for the television hour, quarter meaning financial quarter.
Yeah, rather than the quarters, because well, we can look at Q4 in a minute. But but it's this thing of, okay, so the Live Plus 7-day viewership, which we get segments of from Wade Keller, peaked for the Moxley Cope street fight. Okay, so the reason we're not using live same day is because Kenny's match, with the Brian Cage, where the rating was carried by the opening quarter, and then I think by Max in the middle. Tony Storm in Q7 was the other, the big quarter in that, because the women's corner. So that's the one with the highest viewership of the year. So we can't use that one as the example. So we need to use Live Plus 7 days. A metric that's never been used. But also we're using viewership. I mean, we can use the demo on that one. It was 0.19. That was the highest demo of the year so far. But we're using viewership where we normally ever have used viewership. In fact, Tony Khan has come out and said that the way the game works and the way this, everything's measured is by the demo. But now we're talking about viewership because we can't really talk about the demo so much. Let's rewrite that statement, right? AEW has touted the success of Hangman Page since winning the title, citing a disconnect with online fans. AEW claims that the company's Live Plus DVR quarters have climbed throughout the year, with Hangman as champion, peaking with the Hangman Lance Archer death match on 2nd of the 9th, 2022. I can do this too. Was that the peak in Live Plus same day and Live Plus 7? Yes, it was. That one was, because I have that note, 1.129 million viewers for that show. Was it the top quarter on the show? No. Was the deathmatch the top quarter on Dynamite on that one? On this current one with Moxley? No. So we can do that. We can make that statement and we can say exactly the same thing. So did that show get stronger during that period? Yes. With Hangman as champion. Would we ever equate that to only Adam Page? No, of course not. But that's what we're doing here, right? And then the other one. So that one was from Fightful. And then the other one was, this is from The Observer on Friday. So there is a perception of Moxley and Death Riders being a failed angle, but business indicators would show the company is doing stronger and Moxley is the strongest character in that growth period. In fact, Moxley's last TV matches, the street fight with Copeland and a tag with Shafir versus Strickland and Willow Nightingale, both topped 1 million views on YouTube, which would be the 2 highest in a long time and a number that would be considered strong for WWE, which has exponentially more worldwide visibility. I can read that too. I can read, business indicators would show that the company is doing stronger with Hangman as the strongest character in that growth period. In fact, Hangman's last TV match, we use the same one there, the Texas Death Match with Lance Archer, had 1 million views on YouTube. It's very easy. We're using metrics and we're cherry picking to try and find something to justify something. Yeah. And what this got is, we've had all these things that he's a draw, he does this, he does that. We're going to equate anything to him, to the point where you got a gold star because you said that anything we talk about the attendance of Dynasty in the last few weeks build, that's going to be given to Moxley. When we look at the pay-per-view number, it was slightly down on last year, that would be given to Moxley. You were absolutely right that there was never going to be, maybe we look at Swerve's live ticket sales and see the last 2 pay-per-views that he's main evented, there's been lots of late night sales, like last minute sales, No, that doesn't count. It's all about, it's all Moxley. Okay. So what I wanted to do, and I feel like I've got to kind of say a fair few things before I even say it, just to kind of stop anyone kind of jumping down the tail a little bit. But there's all these statements, right, about where their business is. And I want to talk about actually where their business is.
Yep.
And I want to quantify this with a few things first. I want to quantify with one, they got a fantastic TV deal last year.
Yes.
And that safeguards them for the foreseeable future. They obviously have a very strong relationship with WBD because, they've got collisions that were previously cancelled and now being used as lead outs for sporting events particularly. And we're going to see a bit more of that. So obviously there's some strengthening that relationship here. They picked the right time to do that. In fact, the timing was perfect because of the loss of the NBA, but also now when you look at the kind of global economic kind of impacts, we don't know what's going to happen with ad rates. We don't know what's going to happen with multiple other things. So, value is going to maybe change. So they got the right time in that. So they are secure. They are safeguarded. They are financially successful. What we are measuring when we're looking at this is this statement that the business is up and the main driver is this title reign.
Yep.
And this story. That's it, okay? I'm not discussing whether they are financially solvent. We all know they are, okay? We're not discussing whether...
They're going to go out of business next week.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're lying about how much money they make or whatever some of those fucking weirdos on the internet do. That's not about...
Yeah.
This is not what this is about. This is about directly refuting people who spent all of this week saying that we should put up with all of the bullshit that Trish and I just spent an hour discussing because they're doing good business, okay?
Yep.
Because this angle is directly responsible for the business that they are doing and that it is good.
Okay. Yeah, and it's more so as well, just to say, here is an update on where their business is. And to be fair, I think we've under-discussed it. And I think we've wanted to in a way because we've seen the opportunities and we wanted to take them opportunities. So rather than adding to the chorus of kind of negativity on that, we've kind of let it be. And I've kind of doubted myself on why we did that this week. I looked at, we'll talk about coverage ratings in a minute and some of the work that Brandon Thurston did in the turn of the year when I was away. And I think we should have covered it. And we didn't. And that's on us. It's on me, particularly, because, it's me that looked at it and kind of ignored it. But we're going to talk about all the bits that make up different things that determine popularity, where you can judge the movement of the business. And I think that's important because we're making statements where we're justifying things that not just the internet audience don't enjoy, but the live event audience don't enjoy. And then the same fucking thing. This thing that people are sitting on the internet and we have a disconnect with them.
Yeah, we don't.
We don't. Because if it was just that, then people in venues wouldn't feel that way. They wouldn't come out with these things like, they're the same people. A lot of the people that you're attacking with these statements are the people that supported this company from the start. This company was built from the internet. It was built from people who had, a lot of people who either weren't into the WWE product or been turned off by the WWE product. You are attacking your hardcore or your fan base that does your promotion for you. And if you didn't value them, you wouldn't be promoting your matches by sticking them on fucking Twitter first.
Yep.
Anyway, right. So what we're going to do, if you don't like numbers, tune off now.
If you don't like numbers, why are you listening to this podcast, dude?
Yeah, this is a number podcast, right?
All night, all numbers all day.
All numbers all day. I like that. That's that's another slogan, isn't it?
Another T-shirt.
What was the T-shirt early in the week? What was that one was funny. Numbers aren't for everyone. That was good. I like that one. That was a good one, right? All right. So if this thing was a real business game changer, the business type of game changers that we've had with 3 or 4 world title programs in AEW, we would see multiple metrics changing direction or moving, even if it's temporarily. So, for example, with Adam Cole and MJF, whether you like it, whether you don't, and that is subjective, it's not reliant on business Again, this was a program that did strong business for AEW. Merchandise did huge sales. They did pretty big ticket sales. If you look at the rate of ticket increase for Wembley after that match was announced compared to last year's main event, it's a huge difference. And you saw with the tag, how much impact that had. You can pick out in MJF's run a number of examples all the way up to World's End, which did a big pay-per-view number and a sold-out gate. Whether we like it or not, and we didn't, but whether we like it or not, it was a big business mover. Omega and Hangman Page, you've got quarters over 20%. You've got ratings going from a 0.35 to a 0.45 in the state of few 4 weeks. You've got a pay-per-view that did 95% more than the year previous. So you've got a lot of things in these things. You can look at attendance, you can look at all these different metrics. There is something to see. And this one, I don't know how much there is to see. The more I look at it, the less I find, actually. So we'll start with the one that's being talked about. So let's talk about ratings.
Yep.
So we're using some live DVR number. We're comparing total viewership to Q4, just going through this year. We have never measured these things in the way people are measuring these things now.
Yeah.
And nobody has. But for some reason, we're changing the way that we talk about things in order to fit this rhetoric. So when we look at something like AEW, we get the quarters, and we compare the quarters, because the idea is that you don't compare individual ratings, and because you want to actually see a pattern established, because things are volatile. You have a collision that goes against a WWE pay-per-view or PLE, and then you have a collision normally, you're going to get two different numbers. So am I going to look at everything on that next show and say that was great and that show was shit? No, because the variation of the kind of the elements is different. So we look at it in quarters. And what we do is we compare the spring of one year to the spring of the next year. And we compare, the summer to the summer. So Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Because, if you are in the summer when most people are out and about, there's less traffic, the lead-in drops, all those sort of things, that's a different situation to what it is in January and February and March. So when we're comparing the spring, we don't compare so much to Q4 last year. We compare it to last year in the same time period with the same challenges. Maybe not the same competition. We've had Q1s with things like the Challenge or when NXT was hot in 2021. Vanderpump Rules. That was a big spring. Rules. That was a big spring thing. In the winter we seem to have a lot more of your bigger shows on your network stuff. So that's kind of how we do it in that regard.
It's a macro version of what we do when we talk about the quarters, right? How quarter 1 and quarter 5 are the big quarters. How quarter 7 tends to be lower. It's comparing different times of year to different times of year.
Exactly, right? So there's another way of doing this. So we see the standard, the Nielsen ratings, right? So you'll see it your 600,000 and your 0.17, and Dynamite has pretty much lived at 0.17 for the whole of that first quarter.
Yep.
There is no rapid variation. There is no kind of max movement. And I'm going to mainly talk about demos because the demo is what Tony Khan says that matters, right? So we're going to talk about a demo. And, the demo dropped from Q4. Q4 was a 0.19. But that drop, that 12% drop, isn't kind of what we'd look at. So there's this thing called coverage ratings. And what coverage ratings are is that they account for the loss of homes. So everyone talks about that all the time, like, oh, but what do it mean with cord cutting? Well, we can take cord cutting out and we can see, how that works. And what we didn't acknowledge last year, and we should have done, was there was a steep drop in the second half of last year. So, for example, we talked about, I just mentioned the Max and Cole program. So if I look at summer of 2023, I can see that Q3, so July through September, was up 2% in coverage ratings on the previous year. Down, and then in Q4, they were up 4%. So both quarters at the end of that program and the end of that year were actually up compared to the year previous if we look at the rating once we take out the cord cutting. So that, to me, when you look at it, if you wanted to identify a successful world title program and actually allocate it to it. And there's a reason why I wouldn't. But if you were going to, you'd look at that and say it's been successful. You look at the start of 2024, when they were up 6% on the year previous with the Swerve, Hangman, and Samoa Joe program, and you'd say that was successful. When we get to the end of last year, something else happened. We had this rapid deterioration in the second half of last year. So if we look at Q3, it's down 15% on coverage rating. And if we look at Q4, it's at 0.51, it's down 21%. Q4 last year is the worst rating quarter that this company has ever had. And that's not due to cord cutting, because this equates for cord cutting. It was the worst rating quarter they have ever had. Full stop. So if we are talking about an improvement in rating, and we're not talking about improvement in rating, we're talking about a slight improvement in viewership in Q1, then we are talking about, as Dave put it, a tepid kind of positive from the worst quarter they have ever had at the start of this Death Rider angle.
I think it's also worth pointing out that we've talked a lot about how much after January, the Death Riders angle was downgraded on television.
Yeah.
How much less time that angle got on television after January. How many changes they made in a lot of their programs and what was being put on TV after January.
See, our friend Mark, and I'm not doing that as a joke because it sounds like it sounds like the joke, doesn't it? Like the Triple H line.
Yeah, it really does. That's what I was thinking of.
And I was like, as soon as he said it, and I was like, how am I supposed to introduce that without saying our friend Mark? And well, our friend Mark, whose real name might not be Mark, because it isn't. He asked if we could compare and have a look at quarter hours, because the next thing, as everyone says as well, these segments are doing huge quarter hours. Moxie's a huge quarter-hour draw, and Moxie is a quarter-hour draw because Moxie came into this company as a draw. Okay, so what I'd expect to see. So if we look at like the Swerve Hangman Joe program last year, we saw quarter hours. Where are we? Here's Kenny and Hanger. There we go, that one. We're seeing quarter hours for like 13%, 23%. The highest quarter hour of the year last year in terms of increase measured against the 90-day average. We're seeing openings of 1.01 million or 1.03 million. We're seeing huge numbers generated by this program that are above the average of what you expect this talent to do. That's where I look for a successful world title program. So I had a look at the quarters, and you can absolutely see this is not a program that is dominating television. And it hasn't been. And I think that's sometimes why we're feeling so much with the pay-per-view, because it dominates the pay-per-view. It dominates how that pay-per-view feels at the end, but it's not on dominating television. This is not something driving television. And you can tell that. So the way I measure quarter hours is to try and make them as fair as possible. So I don't use any quarter hours where those talents have not been 5 minutes of the quarter hour. Because using a quarter hour rating where they've had 1 minute of it is just completely fucking pointless. How can you identify any impact off 1 minute or 2 minutes? You can't. It's just it's not a good use of data. So the way I do it is we take everyone, 5 minutes across in a quarter, and then we measure it against the 90-day average. So if a quarter, say if you're in quarter 5, obviously generally a growing quarter, and say that normally does plus 3% in a demo, and this quarter does plus 8, we're going to minus it. So we're going to say, okay, so it's normally 3%, this one's 8%, so it's 5% better than what it was. So in terms of Moxie and Copeland, in the first 3 months, the first quarter of the year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I have 7 segments for Jon Moxley over 5 minutes in a whole quarter that we can use in this study. I have 8 for Adam Copeland. It gets worse, and you've got to remember that you can't use the first quarter. So for someone like Kenny Omega, whose most of his stuff has been in the first quarter, but we'll come to what that's used for in a minute, he only really has, I have 2 quarters that I can use for him, and we can't use the overruns either because it's uneven, so I can't measure a 15 minutes against a 6 minutes. That's just daft. But what you do see on this is when you're looking at anything in the middle of the show, if this was the significant driver of these ratings, of this build up during the year where, you know, and yeah, they've had some viewership get stronger. The demos stayed the same. The demos just exactly the same. Then I would expect to see some significant numbers in these columns. And I kind of don't. So with Jon Moxley, you know, the most significant quarter hour in terms of performance against what's normally expected was actually the Swerve Strickland promo 2 weeks ago. It's not the any of the stuff of Adam Copeland. So what I did was I just averaged them out. So Mark asked about how it compared to Tony Storm. And what I did is I averaged them out, so viewership pluses and demo pluses. And, you know, I think I have a number of kind of positive ones. And I thought I'd add in some more. So I chucked in Kenny Omega, ended up not having enough of a data set for him. Chucked in MJF, you know, will upset some people with, I knew the result was going to be there. I chucked in Adam Copeland, I chucked in Swerve Strickland. And what you get is you have a number of people delivering kind of positive demo results. So everyone that I've got, so Omega, who I've kind of ruled out, but through status, Tony, MJF, Cope, Mox, Swerve, Adam Page, they all have a positive impact in a demo, and you know you have to take in line that they're being protected, but there is no soaring kind of ahead for Mox and Cope. So the average of the demos, you know, for 5 minutes in a quarter that you can measure for Moxley is 3%, and for Adam Copeland has been 2% in a demo. So that's been the average gain for those guys. Swerve's also been at 2%. Tony Storm was at 5%. So a little bit limited set, five occasions. And then the joint top, do you want to guess? Go on.
Is it Swerve and Hangman?
No. Swerve's at 2. Swerve's had some tougher quarters, to be fair. No, what was the so in terms of TV, in terms of increase for quarter hours, the top program for this year so far would be Adam Page and MJF, which doesn't surprise me because I always thought if you put them together that it could have a significant effect on TV because they appeal to different demos as well, in the most part. So that really didn't surprise me. But yeah, if you want to look at demo impact, you have an argument that Tony Storm had more of a demo impact if you want to analyse quarter hours than the Moxley or Copeland programs. So that is quarter hours. In terms of this quarter, it's significantly down in the demo from last year. We're talking
significantly down in the demo.
We're talking 37%. So 37%, a coverage rating in general has never been higher than the year before with a 14% swing. So if there was a 14% drop in the demo from last year this time to this year, then there's a chance that the coverage rating might be higher. So when we take out the loss of homes, that they'd actually be up. This sort of loss, it isn't up. It's not up at all. So we'll wait to get that figure, either through Wade Keller or Brandon First, and thank you both for the data for this. But regardless, either way, this quarter is not up on last year. And look, we can look at the impact of Max and things, and we'll do that after because we've got some insight on the BJ Bethel report, and I want to go through that. Yeah. But you can't use this as evidence of something kind of fundamentally changing your business. So that's how I kind of feel on that. But there's going to be this argument. Okay, but we have the Max thing, and okay. So let's look at some other metrics. And before we go on that, I just want to mention that if it's total viewership that we're looking at, and that sort of thing, then the top viewerships of the year in terms of quarters as well was around the comeback of Kenny Omega. So that's that. Let's talk about attendance. Let's talk about attendance. All right.
People looking at all the wrong numbers for attendance lately.
Yeah, I've quite enjoyed it in a really kind of like, what the fuck are you doing kind of way. But, I mean, do you want? You do you. I don't know what people are looking up in terms of attendance or what they kind of think. So I've seen some weird things. I've seen people looking at the Dynasty kind of number and comparing that to last year when it's a different market. We don't tend to do that for that particular reason. We tend to, look and say, okay, how's that market doing? But we're not using the numbers again that we normally would. So we seem to have gone into this thing where we've just thrown them all to one side. And I guess what will be thrown out straight away is that they're using smaller buildings in some cases. Okay. And they are. There are some buildings that they've moved down to, but you're only making that move because you can't fill the other ones. And it's right. They should do it. It makes for a better atmosphere. Hopefully, it's the start of hopefully it's the start of like a turn in that regard. But has that meant that the buildings that they were using still using? So not every building is smaller this year, right?
No.
So when we look at the kind of markets to markets for Q1, if you look at that figure, so these are all the places where they've run the same event type, so a collision after a collision or a dynamite after dynamite. So that means we take into account the conditions, different days of the week, etc., different shows because a collision is not as powerful as a dynamite, etc. Their kind of market to market average for Q1 is a minus of 28%. So 28% less people went to shows in the same market as last year. And the answer will then be, well, we've had different venues in some of these places. And I think they're fair comparison because none of them have been sold out. I think the nearest it got to was Cincinnati, were like 20 out. And if I then take out, so we have had ones in the same building. So Oakland was in the same building, Fresno was in the same building, Cedar Park, which is just outside of Austin, was in the same building, Charlotte was in the same building, Jacksonville was in the same building, and Huntsville was in the same building. If I put all them together, it's still minus 19%. So when we use the same building, the market-to-market attendance is down 19%. We have one positive market-to-market attendance in that, and that's Jacksonville. And Jacksonville is kind of a wishy-washy number because of how many comps are involved in that one. It's a difficult one to kind of... I normally, to be fair, when I do comparisons, I normally throw Jacksonville out no matter what, either way. Up, down, I don't really care about Jacksonville because we know that it's a kind of a dodgy number. Well, not dodgy number, but it's
not necessarily trusted.
Yeah, it's not going to give you a great comparison. You're looking for comparisons here. You're looking for comparables to identify trends because that's what we're doing. We're not looking to prove a hypothesis or do anything like that. We're just looking to identify the trends and see what we can spot. That's kind of it for that. But then when I look at Q1 for, the numbers, and so I'd be like, okay, let's have a look at where they're at. And I look across the board and it's like, why is someone like Dave Meltzer making a statement that says, what did he say that drove me absolutely crazy the other day? If attendance drops with this angle. And it's like, does anyone actually know where attendance is up to with this company right now? Is anyone actually doing the work other than Brandon Thurston? And it's because this is crazy. So we've got huge market-to-market downs. When you look at some of the stories, like, we looked at Q2 2023, Adam Cole and MJF, they had 4 and 5. So they're up and 4, down in 5. That's kind of one of the stronger performances that they've had. And you're looking for that sort of thing when you turn around. A difference from having 1 to 12 or 1 to 11. But then we're also looking at the average kind of tickets moved. And, we've got the lowest quarter that they've done in ticket sales for Dynamite. We're at 2.7 average this year. We're down 34% on last year. We're actually down on Q4. If you want to know that, Collision, same thing, down again on last year. So these figures are not going up. This business attendance is continually still dropping. It's not plateaued yet. We're waiting for it to plateau. That's what we want it to do, and then they can build upwards from there. We're not at that position yet. So you can say, they're accepting this angle because it's getting great attendance. Like, what am I supposed to be looking at here?
Right.
Like, what am I supposed to be looking at? It's driving me crazy.
Just to say, the reason you can't do Dynasty to Dynasty, for example, is that this year's Dynasty was in Philadelphia, which has a population of 1.5 million, and last year's Dynasty was in St. Louis, which has a population of 279,000 people. Okay? That's the whole, when Trish is saying you can't do, you have to do market to market, you have to compare how they did in the same city last year. That tells you whether or not people are coming back. And I think what's worthwhile here is saying this statistic that jumped out of me. Jesse Collins did he does a survey every year of fans. He did a survey this year. He did a survey last year. He did a survey this year, and one of the questions he asked was, did AEW come to your city, and if it did you go? Right? And 23% of the respondents said AEW came to tour near me, and I did not go. Okay. So that means that these are like the hardcore fans, right? These are people who went out of their way to answer an AEW fan survey and they said, yes, the show was near me and I didn't go. That's counting for some of this, right? And we've talked repeatedly over and over and over again for the reasons why this is. You don't see the people, you don't know who's going to be on the show. You don't see the people you think you're going to see. You're not sure what the deal is, blah, 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 blah. But that's a concerning statistic number and something that Jesse called out as a concerning statistic number. Again, it's a fan survey. It's not definitive, but it combined with the fact that there's just market to market's not matching up, it suggests that there's still a problem here.
If you've got continually dropping attendance, that's not internet fans, right? No. That's not a disconnect with internet fans. That means you've got a disconnect with your live attendees as well.
Right.
And these people are the same people. It's not a different fan base. It's something like throwing it at the internet is so stupid in that regard because these are the people that buy your tickets because you don't advertise to anyone else.
It's the same type of thing where it's like, that you don't understand the story. You don't like the story because you don't understand the story, right? It's that disconnect that you have where it's like, what you're doing isn't working, okay? Yeah. And rather than fight it, and rather than tell me or create statistics that come up that give you a positive, right? That you should maybe stop and look around and say, hey, this isn't working. Maybe we should do something different. Maybe what we hoped we were going to be able to do and accomplish with this, we haven't been able to do. Especially when you have a goddamn stadium show in less than 3 months that you have to sell.
And that should be the easiest one because that's a destination show. That's your easiest one to sell. But when you're going to tell me that everything's working and it's much stronger in this quarter for everything, well, live attendance wasn't. They were down 30% in quarter 4 to 3.1K from 4.5, and then this quarter, they were down from 4.1 to 2.7, 34% drop. It's not. And then we have the market to markets. We have the same venues. We're not selling out the smaller venues yet to justify any sort of getting rid of that comparison. Right. So when you are telling me that attendance is up, attendance is not up. Ratings, ratings, you're going to get this glossy picture in terms of because of the Max thing. But are they up? No. We're looking at the coverage ratings from last year and how we measure them because that is how we measure them. No, they're not up. And then we get to pay-per-view. Okay.
Always fun.
Yeah, so the key thing to mention about pay-per-views is an estimate. We do not get actual pay-per-view figures. Nobody gets actual pay-per-view figures outside of the company. They don't. It's not happened for a while. I mean, Thurston used to get them kind of revised a few years later. He had some revisions that we made to, especially 2020. But no one's getting it. So they're all estimates. These are estimates that we are going off, okay? To say that, so we've said that. The only 2 pay-per-views in the last year that the company has acknowledged as being up are Revolution last year and All Out. No other pay-per-view has been acknowledged by the company in any way of beating the previous years. And that's how we measure it. We don't measure, Revolution against World's End like we don't measure Backlash against WrestleMania. It's like, Jesus Christ. So this thing these pay-per-views are doing better than the ones in the winter. So how did the ones in the winter perform? And so we've got Wrestle Dream, and I always use Brandon Thurston's numbers because he prints an actual estimate number rather than a medium. Yeah, so Wrestle Dream was down 7% year on year on Thurston's numbers. Full Gear was down 16%, 131,000 down to 113. World's End, 140,000 to 115,000, 22%. Worst performing pay-per-view of the year. Would I celebrate anything rising from that? No. Because it's just crazy. So then Revolution, we have Dave's estimate. So I took the middle value. So he said 130, 140K. So we'll take 135. Down 33% on last year's 180,000. Fair enough. Sting's kind of last match. I can understand that. If I look at where that sits compared to, so if we look at Full Gear percentage movement to Revolution, we've had a tendency to be up around the same rate as what this Full Gear to Revolution did. It's very, very similar. So we're seeing a seasonal impact because, Revolution has traditionally been one of the strongest pay-per-views in terms of buy rate. And so it's a good number in line what they were doing. Before Christmas, the numbers there were underneath that line. And then we've got this one, 122K down to 115 on, if I use the average, so down 6%. So there is nothing in these pay-per-view numbers that, again, is showing growth. Nothing that's showing growth. If I put all them together. Oh, Jesus, I haven't done this, so this is on the spot, isn't it?
Oh, on the fly math.
On the fly math.
On the fly math. Do you mean to go do like the Jeopardy? Well, I can't do that possibly because of copyright restriction reasons, but I'll go and do a thing like this.
Yeah, you can do that while I put this last one in.
Putting math to get like live math, folks. Well, it's not live for you because this is taped, but like what other podcast is doing live math on? Okay, probably WrestleNomics, but okay, there's what other podcast featuring girls is doing live math on?
137,200. Okay, so let me just put that number in. 137,200. So the same pay-per-view cycle. So the same pay-per-views: Wrestle Dream, Full Gear, World's End, Revolution, Dynasty. Yep, they're the same ones that we're looking at this reign, and we're comparing them to 2023 into 2024. Would have the 137,200 average on that one. Is that right? And then on that one, that feels a little bit low. 116.60. Yeah, 1,000. Yeah, 116. So the average for this cycle has been 116,600, and the average for last year was 137,200. If you want me to take Revolution out, because I'm sure that'll be said, won't it? Let's do that. We can do that. Nice and easy. So you want to take Revolution out because, you want to say, oh, it's all about the Sting retirement. So I've got what they are, 112, and on that one, we have...
This is the closest I will ever come to a Wrestling Observer Radio.
126. Yeah, so you're still looking at a 14,000 difference average per pay-per-view in buys compared to the same cycle last year, even if I take Revolution out. So if you think it's, that number is all coming from Sting's retirement, I take that out and we're still down significantly. So there's nothing in pay-per-views. The strongest performance out of all those things, you're looking at Wrestle Dream and Dynasty. And Wrestle Dream the year before was a disappointing number. Didn't really have a main event, and there was lots of other kind of little issues with that. I can understand that. And Dynasty, yeah, it is where it is. It's an interesting one because last year it came after WrestleMania, which I think hurt it. And also, but then it had an extra few weeks. This year it was bundled in with Revolution on Trello and things like that, but had shorter time. So it's a kind of a hard one to dissociate all them factors. So they gained in some ways from where it was positioned and they lost in others. So yeah, you can't, look, the whole point was there's not a pay-per-view argument for this reign yet. There isn't. And so we're going to use that's not there. It's not an attendance. We haven't got an attendance one. We haven't got a pay-per-view one. We haven't got a ratings one. Right. So have we got a merch one? Let's have a look at that, actually. We've got a merch argument, because, we talked about Adam Cole and MJF and how that shifted merch. So let me have a look. And to be fair, I only got to 8 because it's fucking impossible to go through that 10-year list to find the top. What are the top 8 selling release shirts for this year? Okay.
Oh, I have a guess.
Do you have a guess? Well,
yeah, I have a guess.
We're not even so these are the standard shirts. So limited edition, we know that the top selling thing of the year so far was the Adam Page shirt, the lighter version of the dark version. They released for a week. He even tweeted about it, and we could see that. We could see where his position and stuff. So the top 10, I only had 8 because if you can't get, it's fucking impossible to get further down. The biggest selling released standard shirts for this year, or standard items, were the Adam Page Unhappy Terrell shirt, the Kenny Omega Monolith baseball tee, the Omega I'm Back tee, the Page Leaves His Plants tee, the Omega One Winged Angel hoodie, the Abaddon Microballer. Shout out Abaddon for breaking in this list. The Hounds of Hell Run shirt and a Julia Hart in the Card shirt. Okay, so is this program driving merch? Well, do you know what? Maybe that's just, that's the big shirts. But maybe in the year there's been parts where this program has kind of really driven like merch. And then I go in and I go, okay, so what was the biggest selling things in January? It was around the return of Kenny Omega. Okay, what was the biggest thing in February? There was a few Kenny Omega items, Swerve, Harley Cameron, which makes sense because, that was popular ahead of Grand Slam and Hounds of Hell. Okay, and then I go into March and it's all MJF and Adam Page. And I go into April and I have Adam Page, I have Tony Storm, I have Willow, Adam Page, and the limited edition Will Ospreay thing. Not seeing this story. Not seeing this story, not seeing this metric, not seeing this thing that this run is generating anything. You know what I see? I'll tell you what I see. I see the same thing I see generally with AEW. And why I think that making these statements is a kick in the face to a lot of your talent as much as it is to your fan base. Because you're desperately trying to justify something when actually you could just say, we have a vision, we're confident in it, that's it. Now, instead, you're going to use metrics that you are manipulating. And, you can do that. You're a promoter, but it's up to everyone else to actually analyse it fairly. Okay? I do not want these metrics to read like this. I do not want to see attendance down. I do not want to see ratings down, and that's a complicated one. But I can't see any quarter hour or any other impacts that makes this program and this Death Rider story more impactful than any of these other things. Because when I look at these TV ratings and I look at this attendance and I look at everything else and I look at the merch and I look at everything like that, what do I see? I see a quarter that was impacted by Tony Storm and Mariah May's story. I see a quarter that was impacted by Kenny Omega's return and the stuff with Will Ospreay and the DCF. I see a quarter that was massively relied upon the back of MJF and Adam Page. I see some influence with Swerve and Ricochet. I see, things with Mercedes and Harley Cameron. I see all these things that built, because this company, if it's going to get out of this position, if it's decline that it's currently in, and I take no fucking pride in saying that, is going to do it off the back of everyone. There isn't a one-person solution. There isn't a one-story solution. There never has been and never will be. Even when I look at stuff like Adam Cole and MJF in 2023. What else was going on at that time? Oh, you had, for what it was worth, you had the return of CM Punk, but you also had the BCC and Elite stuff that helped them sell out Boston, that drove some of those ratings, that was carrying those quarter hours before that program picked up in Max's title reign. When you look at Hangman and Adam Page and Kenny Omega, hitting crazy ratings over the summer of July 2021, massive quarters, massive impact, massive interest, massive attendance numbers. But also, we had Chris Jericho and MJF underneath that, also doing strong business. There has never, ever, ever, ever been a time period, ever, in this company where one thing has been solely responsible for how they do and for them improving. The most successful times in this company's period in their history is always the same things. There are multiple things working because the audience is different in its construct from something like WWE. It needs multiple things to appeal to everybody. You cannot get away with just shoving something down someone's throat and throwing everything else to the side, because every time you've done that, you've lost.
And listen, I get it. It does seem as though every time complaints about AEW hit critical mass and a bunch of people get really aggravated like they did after the end of that show on Sunday, a bunch of people come rushing in to say, actually, it's really not that bad. Actually, there might be a reason for it. Actually, it could be okay, right? You guys gotta take a second and say, hey, the metrics are better. Well, how do we know? Well, Tony Khan told us.
He's a promoter. He's a fucking promoter.
You shouldn't take that as, you shouldn't base podcasts around that. You shouldn't do the research your fucking selves, guys, sometimes, okay? You have to sit down and look at the numbers. You can't just be like, well, Tony says that it's not. They're not doing better. I would love for them to be doing better. I want them to be doing better. I also want to say flat out, if they were doing better, do you think they would have downcycled the freaking Death Riders the way they would have? They would have put them all over the fucking shows. Instead, we had less of them this quarter than we did in quarter 4. Okay? So, that's the part where, sometimes you gotta do a little critical thinking here, please. They're not doing better. And I'm sorry. The one thing I will say to you guys, if you want to look for a visual of this, and I can't recommend WrestleNomics enough. Again, Trish and I are nerds. We like this kind of nerd shit. We get that it's not everybody's cup of tea. If you like this kind of stuff, I recommend WrestleNomics. They had a piece yesterday where Brandon Thurston did rankings for TV ratings. He did 18 to 49 for cable and broadcast. It was a moving to a 52-week medium smoothed, and you can see from it that starting in frickin' September, Dynamite takes a goddamn nosedive. Just falls off the fucking cliff, okay? And does not recover and has not recovered. And that's the part where I think people have to sort of say to themselves, just question it a little bit more, okay? Don't be so quick to be and if as always, if you genuinely like this angle and this is your idea of a good time, then great. Have fun with it. We're glad somebody's enjoying it. Enjoy it, please. Turn us off. Don't listen to us complain about it. We get it, right? We're not trying to harsh your buzz. But if your just defense of this is that Tony Khan says it's doing good business, then stop and reevaluate your life and your choices for a second, please, because it's not doing good business.
It's that thing, right? So I think people are looking for something to justify this choice, and I think they want, they're so desperate for AEW to be kind of popular in that way. And we're not measuring the company being successful, because the company is immeasurably successful.
They're very successful.
Because of
They're
the
hugely
TV deal
successful.
that they've signed. Okay? They are successful. What we're measuring is this statement that this has been better for business. And it's not there in the numbers. In fact, if you were going to measure impact from this year of things that look like they've been stronger for business, you wouldn't look at this first. You might look at that one match and say that triggered a rating, because they did a viral spot. But do I want someone sticking some spikes in their back every time to get a rating to then justify everything? No! Jesus Christ. Like, that should be the least of
No, I was just going to say, I'm also old enough to remember when they had TV title matches on television regularly, and they regularly popped ratings. Like, we don't see that as often as we used to, but it did move numbers once upon a time.
But go and look at the Samoa Joe match last year with Hook. Go look at that episode rating. Go look at what happens with the quarter pattern there. How the end of that match was the strongest thing on the show. How often do you see that? Go look at the match numbers that Kenny Omega was putting up. Even go look at some of the numbers MJF was putting up in his reign, in terms of title matches on TV. There is nothing out of the ordinary here. If you want to say it's fine by TV ratings because, of the impact of Max, fine. But it's not some spectacular program that's driving numbers. It's not. It's absolutely not. And there's not a metric you can show me that proves that. There isn't. And I can go through every single thing like this. Because I'm not seeing what we saw with MJF and Cole. I'm not seeing what we saw with Hangman Swerve and Joe last year, which is an underrated TV program because it didn't main event a pay-per-view. For some reason, that now means that it doesn't exist in terms of being a successful program, even though it was the driver of TV ratings during that period. I'm not seeing the Hangman, Kenny impact. We're not seeing any of that. It's not there. So what we're doing is we're using invisible numbers to justify something, rather than saying and being clear about our creative and actually we just have a plan. You can just say we have a plan. We have a plan and we're going to get people on board. It's not, you don't need to do this thing where you actually come out and attack the people that do most of the work for you in terms of your marketing half the time. And, there are other impacts in this. There are global impacts. You talk about, inflation and, how much that affects live business. But when I look at Japan and I look at the impacts there and all the reports I've been reading this week around, the inflation and how much they're cutting back household spending because everything's going on. And then I look at the numbers of something like the Goto reign. And it's impossible to separate that it's not just a global impact. If every other company is seeing impacts based on their booking, then I can't put this down to a global impact. I can't do it. And yeah, I'm sure we're going to have the same argument when people try and twist themselves into pretzels when we get to the Owen final in about 3 weeks and try and use numbers for that. So I'm not looking forward to that one. But yeah, that's it. I don't want to do this, but I can't listen to it anymore. I can't sit here and have people say business is up, because it doesn't help them to have this thing repeated to them to justify things that aren't working. Anyway.
It's been a very annoying week in that way.
Yeah. So just to close things off. So BJ Bethel put out a report a couple of weeks ago that stated that sources from Max have told him that every episode of Dynamite has been watched by an average of 60 million. Had an average viewership of 60 million minutes per live plus 1 day. And that was equated to 500,000 people watching and then added together to give us a 1.1 million total. So I spoke to BJ because I wanted to clarify a couple of things. So I listened to his appearance on Voices of Wrestling and I read the write-up in The Observer because I believe that he spoke to both Dave and to Brian. And I wanted to kind of clarify that before we spoke about this, because as soon as I read that report, I was like, it doesn't read right. And I couldn't help it because my brain is not to just accept a statement, it is to kind of quantify it and go, okay, so how does that work? So the 60 million watched minutes, has quite a large variation from episode to episode, at 10 to 20%. And that also includes replays. So the biggest thing with this is this is not a Nielsen number.
No.
Okay, this is like a Netflix number. So if you look at the Netflix numbers and the estimates that we get to a Nielsen number, you've got a situation now where we have Brandon Thurston and Dave Meltzer doing their own estimates for the Netflix raw ratings. And Dave's have been around 1.2 to 1.3, and Brandon's have been around 1.7. So we have this huge differentiation between, the two kind of leading wrestling kind of numbers people on these estimates, because you don't have the data. We are working estimates based on, Dave's working off minutes, Brandon's working off the video amp thing for the demo, from the debut, so he can then work backwards from that. And then we have the situation where they change the amount of minutes watched with the ad breaks and all those sorts of things. So there are all these variable factors that mean that we are getting very different estimates from, and both are right. Both have it all wrong, or you can look at it either way. But both are right. Both are not bad estimates, but they are only estimates because that's all we have available to us. And it's the same with this max thing. So we have 60 million minutes watched, similar to like a metric that we get off Netflix, okay? What we don't know is how many of them are repeated viewers. So if you watch on Nielsen, say you watch, I don't know, pick a match. Say you watch a party match from last Wednesday, right?
Yep.
And you go back and you watch it. And you've already watched a whole show. Well, that doesn't count because you've watched the whole show. So you are one viewer, one whole viewer. And then say you go and then watch that on Max, you are adding to this 60 million minutes. So you are the same viewer, you are not a new viewer, but you are part of that. If you watch that show on Max once and then you watch it again, you're now 2 viewers. Okay? So, and that happens, you get a lot of that. The second part of that is we don't know how many people are being accounted for each account. So this is something that BJ brought up to me when I asked him the other day, and I think it's important to know. And this is the same with Netflix. So Video Amp estimate that the household viewership rating on Netflix is 1.37 people per account. So all the calculations that Brandon Thurston does is based on the fact that 1.37 people are counted as like one account view. So, for example, if this 60 million minutes, if there's 2 people watching this show, rather than 500,000, it could be 250,000. This is where the streaming numbers, and that's not the same as with Nielsen, right? Nielsen is working out one person to one person. And then you've also got the additional issue of the length of the show is not exactly 2 hours. So you've got to then add on the extra minutes as well to get that and that. But what this key is that these are separate measurements. We don't have so many of the variables. What you can't do, and there's nothing, these are, this is sourced information. The 60 million minutes is a source piece of information.
Yeah.
This is something that someone from Max has given to BJ. There is no one's arguing that number. What we're arguing is how does that quantify? How does that kind of actually represent? Right. But what everyone wants to do is change it into Nielsen ratings because that's the metric we're used to. But it's actually kind of false in its proviso anyway, because there are not, and there has never been, 600,000 people watching Dynamite every week.
Right.
Because Nielsen is an average. So that's it's simple. If 60 if people watch 60 to 75 minutes on Dynamite on average, which is the average viewership, and say if they only watch 60 minutes, and it is not going to be perfect because the episodes are not 120 minutes long, then 1.2 million people are watching Dynamite if everyone is only watching 60 minutes. But Nielsen will take the average of the whole program, and that's where you get your 600,000 from. So there has never been 600,000. There's more likely when you look at that and then Live Plus 7 Day, there's more likely kind of 1.5 million people watching Dynamite every week or a part of Dynamite every week. It's just that's not how Nielsen measures. So then we're adding this 500,000 to this 600, but it's not the same measurement. So you can't treat this as, there's 1.1 million people watching Dynamite every week. Because actually there's probably like 1.6, 1.7, 1.8. You're probably looking at additional kind of 100 to 200,000 people, more than likely when I look at these, watching Dynamite each week. So there is something to be gained from that, whether that's coming from people that used to watch on the TBS app, whether that's coming from people that used to, watch on Fight or Triller or whatever we're going to call it, or whether it's new viewership. Fine. But that viewership is not this, it doesn't mean, they're doing the same amount as Raw every week. Like, come on now, behave yourselves. It's like, that's not what this is, okay?
No.
So this report, it works. Like, you have 60 million minutes. That's a stat that they're giving you of how much they're watching each week. If you want to split that down by the average, 2 hour, 9 minute, whatever it is, episode, and work it out from there, you can do. But there's all these other variables in place. And streamers will always give you numbers like that because they don't want you to have all the context numbers. It's the same with Netflix. So we are living in a very grey world in that regard. We can still learn lots of things from the quarter hours. We can still learn things from the, your other rating data, because they're not the only thing that's streamed on other services at the same time. You see enough judging and talk about NBA ratings. You think if NBA had this huge viewership on Max, that was dwarfing their viewership on cable, that wouldn't be the center point of their discussions, being that like the NBA is taking huge heat for their rating situation? Of course it wouldn't. So it's a number. It gives us some kind of idea of how, something, but it doesn't give us more than that. And what you can't do is treat it like a Nielsen number.
Right.
That's the big thing. But it's one of them,
And kudos to BJ for getting this information, which has been something that has been very difficult for people have been looking for this for a while.
Yeah, and he's worked pretty hard on that. And, if you did believe that was a number and you use it like a Nielsen number, then you'd want to see all the secondary metrics, kind of the attendance, the pay-per-views fly up, because otherwise you end up with a TNA situation where you've got an increase in TV viewership by, having the additional exposure, but then you're not converting them to actual kind of fans, and that's much more kind of position you don't want to be in. People can get in and then get out very quickly in that regard, so you don't want that. We've talked a long time about numbers. I know.
We have. Hopefully some of this makes sense. It's always hard to hear this kind of stuff in audio format, and hopefully, it works. But I think the main point of this is just to sort of be like, as much as we would all like to see a big spike, even if it meant more Death Riders, it's just not there. Yeah.
And there's other things I want to talk about in other companies and numbers at some point. I'm not going to talk about Goto's numbers now. We'll do that next time because I feel like I'm number deaf. I want to talk about the deviation between Raw and SmackDown numbers for live events, because that's quite an interesting story. Raw is surging and SmackDown is dropping, and I think that's an interesting story to go back to that we will. I think that picks perfectly for after WrestleMania, doesn't it? So we'll do that then. So it did get
Trish.
Go on, sorry.
We got to take the L, though. We were very confident last episode that Finlay was going to win, and he did not.
I was going to get onto that, so...
We got to take the L.
Yeah, we'll take the L on that, and I know that the Keeping It Strong Style Boys, I know Josh was kind of like, will Finlay get another opportunity as good as this one? And I think that's worth a question. I do think, I have people said that, he had such a long global reign that giving him a belt straight back may have been part of the choice where they went, we're not going to do that. But also I think, Goto has been successful, and there are big money matches they can do in the meantime if they feel like they want to move to somebody else. So I was surprised, happily surprised. Oh my God, I love Goto matches. There's so much, we're going to end on this because I'm so happy to talk about Goto. This is something that has come out of nothing. It came out of, Finlay and that dog pound cage match last year that tried to kill as many people as possible in Osaka. But coming out of that, unfortunately for David Finlay at the time, has led to this opportunity with Hiroki Goto where they've recognized something and they've thrown it into an emotional program and they pivoted to him, and he's pulling Tetsuya Naito numbers. He's lapping Jay White numbers since from the pandemic. He's lapping Okada numbers. He's lapping Will Ospreay numbers. He's even, he's finally got rid of the Otter record of the Best of the Super Junior Titan Watto. Not finally. I love that final. But he's finally kind of broken that record. He has the Otter record. He has the Ryogoku record for Sakura Genesis. It's the anniversary record since the COVID outbreak began. We've got tours coming up, and it's like, nobody saw this coming. Nobody thought he could put up these numbers, and no one respects, and I think still doesn't, if you don't watch New Japan regularly, understands how this story has resonated with the fans. It's a very much like a Daniel Bryan thing, WrestleMania 30 sort of thing. There is a connection there that we're not seeing that often in places right now. And they're allowing it, they're thriving off it, they're using it, and it's driving them business. It's all the things you want. You want something to be kind of fulfilling creatively, but also that's your maximum drive your business. And this reign is doing that. And we got a question from Drew on our Discord, and I know I've missed a couple of questions today, but there's a couple we're going to come back to next time. But especially for our Chilean friend, your Hangman question, we'll save that for later. But Drew asked, what's going on with Tetsuya Naito?
Yes, the rumors recently emerged that Naito does not have a contract, and that he is which kind of cracked everybody up, because I think the idea of Naito going to the U.S. To work for a U.S. promotion,
he ain't working for a U.S. promotion.
No. That was the but yeah.
He'll play games and bits and pieces, and he's Naito.
Naito's headed to WWE.
If they pay for his knees, I don't. And some eye surgery. No. So the Naito thing, the freelance thing. So there are a lot of people on that roster, especially the Japanese wrestlers, who are currently kind of working as freelancers, a lot more than you probably expect. I think I was suspicious of it because I saw a number of talent who don't normally work a lot of dates outside of New Japan kind of picking up dates on a regular basis this year. And I was like, what's going on here? And that's kind of been said that there are a number of people working that way. There isn't a likelihood of people moving to other places because of the rate of pay, to be quite honest, in New Japan compared to a lot of the other Japanese companies. So you're not going to see someone going, I'm just going to jump to All Japan, or I'm going to jump to Noah. Or that's not what's going to happen here. Most people are just going to stay exactly where they are. When it comes to Tetsuya Naito, what do we know about Tetsuya Naito? There are big plans for him coming up. There's still dates to be kind of arranged, but I do think we're going to see a Naito-Goto match. I think they've been hinting at that because Naito's been whining about Goto in Tokyo Sports, which is like the John Moxley promos, the backstage promos of the C2. If Naito's setting something up, it tends to be through Tokyo Sports at times. Or he just likes to whine in Tokyo Sports. It's kind of both. It's quite funny. It's funny how serious some of them take it sometimes. It's just like, it's just Naito winning. And I think we will see, definitely in the second part of this year, and it makes perfect sense to everybody, we'll see a Naito-Tanahashi match. So these things are plans coming into place. So if you think he's going to walk out straight after Dontaku, I don't see it with these things on the table. I think it's much like that they're going to, it's all in the story now. They're playing it into the story. It's in there with Shingo, it's in there with Hiromu, it's in there with this. They got the belts off them at the last big show in Japan, and that says to me he's going to be doing some single stuff, like Hiromu does Best of Super Juniors over the summer. Would like that to go longer, no? And then you had Jeff Cobb after they won the belt shouting, about the internet, and it's like, well, as far as I'm aware, nothing's changed on your status, and the likelihood is just that unless things fall through with WWE, you're kind of done by Dominion. But yeah, go on shouting, So you carry on shouting, mate. I love wrestlers, they're so funny. But yeah, like New Japan, I thought when you look at what they did this week, it emphasised something someone has said to me a few weeks ago. And so you have the event, the Windy City Riot, and the draw of the show was Takeshita and the final match of Hiroshi Tanahashi in North America. So what we did was we realised that, Shota Umino, who's struggling, and that's a storyline that's struggling at the moment, we put him as the match underneath, and we made Takeshita and Tanahashi the main event. And it was completely the right call, because if you do it the other way around, you may leave kind of, not solemn, but kind of a lot less infused. And what you actually left on was a real emotional moment, something that memorable. I always talk about things needing to be memorable, you don't always remember the 10 5-star matches that you've seen if they're all like very similar in structure, but you remember things that had that aura, or things that the way they make you feel. And we don't talk enough about how things make you feel. And that's why I talk about all this Lee storyline. It's because it doesn't make me feel anything other than kind of like disappointment or kind of I don't care. It doesn't make me feel anything. I don't feel anger. I really want to see this. I don't feel anything. But with this, it's like this made you feel. I was emotional watching Tanahashi. You know, he makes me emotional. He cries all the time too. But it's like you realise that it's a combination of his career, and they made for a great moment just by switching 2 matches, just by making that the end moment. So they recognised that, you know, Goto and Shota wasn't the ideal closer for this, and actually it needed to be Tanahashi's moment with Takeshita and the whole story they told about, you know, him disrespecting DDT and disrespecting him in DDT, and they did a really good job with that. So, yeah, that's an example of not having a story working. Like the Shota thing, I don't think is working. I think we're kind of waiting for something to happen, and we were waiting for it at Sakura Genesis, and it didn't. You know, and there's a lot of people involved in Impact and discussing that and making that character, but they got to figure something out with him. It's still not there, and going, you know what, you know, Goto can get something out of him, but it's not going to be right for that slot, so let's put the thing in that drew the house and it is right for that slot in, and that's what they did. And you know, I think they are making, for the most part, good choices since Wrestle Kingdom, and I think that's part of the reason why, you know, their outlook is brighter this year. I don't think, if you're dooming about New Japan from afar, I don't know how much of New Japan you're watching. So, you know, we'll see what happens going forward. But yeah, I do think the Goto thing they fell into, anyone that doesn't kind of see it or doesn't understand, or Goto's not got charisma, or Goto's not got this, I don't give a fuck. Goto has a connection with the fans that's stronger than anyone other than Naito in the last 5 years right now. Like, you can't buy that. You can't facilitate that. You can't make that. That's the sort of thing you see it, you pivot into it. And they pivoted quite early for New Japan, because they normally wait till after you've kind of forgotten about something to do it. It's like, you're going to get what you want, but it's going to be 2 years too late, is the New Japan strategy sometimes. But yeah, they've done a great job of that. And yeah, I don't think Tetsuya Naito has done Taku. There you go. It's not happening. Not by every discussion I've had in the last few weeks. And thank you to everyone in Japan that helps us there, because we've been getting some pretty cool stuff from Japan the last 6-7 months. So we're very privileged for that. I think we've talked enough. I feel like we've talked enough. I feel like we've...
We crushed it, as per usual.
I don't know, but it's hard, because talking about numbers is difficult. But I can't do this anymore. I can't sit and listen to people talk like,
no, they're doing so much better. It's okay that it sucks. It's not okay.
Yeah, look, if you want to believe that they're doing better because, you know, you don't care, or you just want to, I don't care about that. I don't care, like, if you know, you shouldn't let your numbers affect your enjoyment of wrestling, but you should also not determine your enjoyment of wrestling off numbers.
Yeah.
So there's that. Just as we wrap up, so you mentioned at the start of the episode around Chop Tees and supporting Chop Tees. So I just want to say, if you can support Chop Tees in any way, and it doesn't mean our merchandise, you know, if you support Post or anything else, you know, please do, because businesses like that are going through a horrendous time at the moment, especially the ones that rely on importing, exporting merchandise, you know, sourcing kind of materials, that sort of thing. Those are the real world businesses on small margins that are hugely impacted by this current kind of global turmoil. So yeah, please support businesses like Chop Tees if you can, because they're the ones that are most under threat through whatever's going on with
asininity, stupidity.
So yeah, please support them.
Dumb shittery.
Unfortunately, real life always impacts on us. So it's hard. You know, it's hard for a lot of people right now, and I think that's why things like this kind of get us down. And it's what it is. But yeah, please support Chop Tees. They do a fantastic job. Not just for us at Social Suplex, but also for the likes of Post and everybody else. Yep. It's a great concept, and it's something that I wouldn't want to see go away because of someone's crazy financial decision making in an office somewhere. So that's that. New newsletter will be out on Wednesday. I just want to say, I know you mentioned at the start of the show, but I want to say thank you to everyone that contributed last week the other week to putting everything together, who's contributing to this week, for the increased interest. If you are interested into contributing in any way, we pay contributors. You know, we are not everybody is, you know, working for free or anything like that to put this together. We are trying to provide something where, You know, you're not paid on clicks or anything like that, and you can produce whatever content you want as we look for the most varied thing we can. And it's free. It's free. It's not paywalled. You're getting good information for free. You can contact us at socialsuplexnews@gmail.com for that, socialsuplexnews@gmail.com. Also, if you do want to sponsor or help the newsletter in any way, you can contact us there as well. We're trying to, you know, make it as kind of manageable as possible so we can pay people to write about the thing that they love, or, you know, improve their chances of working in the industry, whatever it is that they want to do. So we're trying to give as many opportunities to people as possible and as much information to people as possible without no paywall. So any support you can give would be fantastic. Not an obligation, for sure. But yeah, that's kind of really moving along. And I want to say a special thank you to Tim Hunter, who has done so much work on this technically that I cannot do. I just don't have the capability to it. I don't have the thing but the amount of work that he put in, you know, last week, and the work that he's put in since, and, you know, Jeremy Donovan, obviously, Keeping It Strong Style, for helping us out, and the technical stuff on there. The effort that everybody's put in is what puts something like this together. And I'm quite proud of what we've managed to accomplish, because it's gone from something that I've just moaned about for a year to being something that's a reality that I think we're quite proud of, and it shows you know, where this network can go. And we've kept push forward. We've kept trying to push forward with everything. You know, look at some of the interviews that have been done here. We've had Swerve Strickland on One Nation Radio in the last year. We've had, you know, the Young Bucks on Tunnel Talk, their only kind of vocal interview in like 3 years. You know, we're talking kind of moving this network and making it something between everybody here, and I think everyone does a great job of that. So this is just the next step. It's just the next step. It's just a written outlook where, you know, it's covered everything in the world. You know, I have had live reports from all over the place this week, and information of that, and we're looking up, you know, shows in Singapore and Malaysia and in Chile, and, you know, I think that's part of it, because everything's become so Americanized in coverage, and, you know, we are in a lot of aspects, and sometimes too, but it's hard not to be. So thank you to everyone that's contributed. Thank you for everyone that's read, given feedback, helped us with the, you know, setup and everything like that. Just immensely grateful for that. Also very grateful, sideway plug, very grateful for Leah for putting everything together for us for all these episodes. Leah of Tunnel Talk out every Sunday. Get your review of AEW Dynamite in the best way possible by exploring all the world, all the characters, all the bodies. I don't know, take your pick.
All the bodies.
That's good. Yeah, watch this week. It's Return of the Young Bucks. You know it's going to be a stellar Tunnel Talk. Come on now. You absolutely know. But no, thank you, Leah. Social suplex plugs. God, I suck at this so bad. You can listen to all our great podcasts on our podcast network on whichever podcast network you use or provider that you use, all over at Red Circle. Red Circle is the home for all of Social Suplex podcasts. You can join our Discord and talk to all the hosts. Lots of gifts this week. I've enjoyed the gifts this week. Lots more gifts. Like more gifts. And but anything there, we answer anything directly. You can leave us questions as well, either there or at trishandsarahpod@gmail.com. trishandsarahpod@gmail.com. We're back in 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks we're going to have All-Star Queendom. We're going to talk a little bit about Stardom for 5 minutes. That'll be interesting, won't it? Because I'm not very good at that, so that's going to be, it's nice to learn. I love learning about new promotions and stuff, and new stories and new characters, so that's going to be interesting. But that's the biggest Stardom show ever. We're going to have WrestleMania. Not so excited about that, but it's there, so we will talk about it. There's loads of independent shows coming up this week, so if you have some spare time, not feeling something, want to catch something, I'm sure, you know, across YouTube, you know, Pandemonium's on YouTube, you've got so many shows on Triller Plus, you're going to have shows on IWTV. There's so much stuff to catch this week, you know, try and, if you feel like watching something else, find something else to watch. There's so much things to catch, so it's a good week for that. I'm off to Doncaster next Sunday for Rev Pro High Stakes. I think we have Mercedes here. Yeah, so that'll be interesting. It's always fun. Doncaster Dome brings old memories back of 1PW when it was fun before they just started taking a lot of money. So so until then, we'll be back in 2 weeks, kind of a big 2 weeks coming up. And until then, I've been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
And thank you for listening for a very number-heavy edition of the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast.